So hi, my people. We meet again. My name is Linda Alela. A couple of things have been playing out politically, socially, so much so, in the world of entertainment, education, and all this we must talk about. So today I want us to look at a bit of this Adani talk that has been there for the longest of time. They say that this is not just a deal that we woke up to. Certainly not. It is a deal that, has been negotiated prior, but Kenyans come to know and learn about it at this very point. And so Kenyans must be involved, It is what the Constitution dictates, that there must be an essence of public participation. Well, you would expect for the government to allow us to go through the right procedure to it, but sometimes it doesn't happen. But even if it doesn't happen, we have the social media, we have all these platforms where we can come together and have that conversation. And so I just want to weigh in onto this matter, as I said, not as a pundit, not as a specialist, not as a legal expert, but basically as a Kenyan who's been following up on events, not just in the country, but across the global beat, across the continent. I remember the time when there was this conversation about the Gupta Brothers in South Africa. You probably could be knowing them if you follow the continental politics. If you do not know, you just write the Gupta brother online and so much so information will come out. What is prominent when all this information comes out is the element of, capture, is the element of corruption, is the element of the Gupta brothers, working together with political leaders in South Africa. And sometimes for the benefit of the people, as they purported, but largely it was about, throwing the country into lowest of levels. And in my opinion, while I was covering this, it was during the going down of Zuma, those times. One of the reasons that, Zuma, went down was largely because of the Gupta brothers.
The report has presented evidence of the abuse of power and how public institutions were repurposed to enable corrupt activities to take place.
And so when I think about those times, then look at what is happening right here in the country. The whistle being blown as to the coming in of the Adani, group. That is, of course, to manage some of the entities in the country. And in this case, we all know that we're talking about the airport that actually triggered, a protest across. And most of the Kenyans have just been weighing in onto this matter. Some analyzing at a very critical level.
Ile tu tutasema ni Adani kama wanakuja ni wale waongezewe watu wengine waweze kufanya kazi.
Neocolonialism is one of the talk that has been there for a long time. Perhaps the greatest fear for the people of Africa today. Why? Because they say that fine, most of the African countries have gotten their independence. And, they appreciate the fact that, they had their forefathers to fight for the independence and they can now man their own nations, their states, by themselves. But the element of colonialism lingers on, and that then becomes neocolonialism. How do we get to these levels? We get to these levels because of course, the numerous investors that then would come from the bigger brothers and coming into different African countries so that they perhaps would come in the name of investment and all that. But then when you get into the root cause or to the substance of it, then you realize that most of these, bigger brothers are always still puppeteering the activities of Africa. That's the question we always ask ourselves every day, that we have all these resources, yet we continue to beg, yet we continue to depend on aid, which would consider dead. And the moment they will aid you, the moment they will come and invest in your country, the moment they will come and begin transacted business, says with you, and we're not saying that businesses are bad, then they also have a chance to get into the activities of the nation through politics. They will always try to run the activities here. I remember some times where some people used to say that perhaps the Chinese investors are good because then when they come into a country, they probably don't focus much on the politics of this country. Theirs is the business of setting up infrastructure, bringing the best of what is in China to these African countries. But there's always a bait to eat, and we'll all have to agree to this fact. And so when we're talking about neocolonialism and, the factor of the importance of having a social contract is when we get to understand just why most of the Kenyans who are now alert on what is happening in the country are a bit agitated about, this whole talk of an agreement between Kenya and the Adani Group. The Adani Group, which I have tried to just check online to see what it is that they do and what they have done across, that, a company or a group that has risen to levels of growth that you cannot imagine in such a short time. They acknowledge it themselves. They say that, well, of course, 20 years back, we were not as good as we are today.
See, I think if you look at from investor perspective, right, as a group, we went through this transition from 2007-8. So if you remember, in 2007-8, we had a holding structure. We had Adani Enterprise, and then we had all the other companies which were subsidiaries of it.
As the Adani portfolio of companies and the Adani Group overall has come prior to the time of Prime Minister Modi.
And there's nothing wrong with that, as long as perhaps whatever it is that they have done in the right way. Just that you find that even as you try to dig in to understand them some more, there are a lot of question marks that are there in relation to their business activities. And when I say their business activities, I mean, I just took time, and I'll be referring to my notes a couple of times here and there. I took time to just perhaps take a look at some of the things that the Adani, group has done, and what it is that they acknowledge themselves they have done across, just like India and across the global fraternity. And you realize that, first of all, they are in a way connected to the likes of, the Gupta Brothers that I mentioned, that of course got South Africa to the level that it is today. Just looking at some of the ones that have been highlighted here that are marred with a lot of gray areas in terms of how they handled some of these projects. They still have active cases in courts. They still have, different countries raising concerns as to them having taken up projects that they never managed to deliver on. They still have questions as to how they managed to grow to the levels that they are in. Of course, their connection with the Indian Prime Minister, Narendra Modi. And you really want to go back and look at some of these and really get to understand, while these cases are active in court, while some of the cases they have challenged successfully, are these the people that, as a nation, you want in your sober mind to engage, to come and run one of the biggest resources in the country? So I would say that Kenyans are justified to ask some of these solid questions. Perhaps this going to the president, this going to the executive, this going to the leadership of this nation. From all what I hear is that Kenyans just really need to get to know what is the deal like the many other deals that we've had before, the SGR amongst the latest that we're talking about. The former president, that is, Uhuru Kenyatta, had promised that he's going to release documentation and, the information about what was the deal between Kenya and China as to the SGR. Well, up until date, we are eagerly waiting to get to see that document. That should tell you that, only a foolish man can sit down and hear about the stories of Adani, taking up the airport to manage it for I don't know how many years, leasing it, and just sit comfortable and say it is well. I know there have been arguments for the longest of time as to the fact that we as Africans, and it's unfortunate that we still talk about it today, in as much as we pride ourselves with the thought that indeed we are good and we can do as good as any other person can do in different sectors. Reality is that there's that element and feel that sometimes it requires for a foreign party to come on board, take up a project for it to be successful or for it to be run well. We probably still have a long way to go. I don't know whether that is the case in terms of making sure that even as we take care of our own oil, that is the oil that was discovered in Turkana. Let us not even remind ourselves of the Ngamia 1, Ngamia 2, and Ngamia 3. That we have Kenyans who are well equipped to handle our resources in the best way that we know how. The other day we were complaining about, the leakage or the leaks that is somewhere at the airport, during the rainy seasons, and, the discrepancies that we got to notice, and we were pointing fingers at the then head or the CS for roads and all that, or perhaps infrastructure. And we kept on asking, what is this that we're not doing right? And maybe they thought it wise to come up with this deal at this point, or perhaps, just get it augmented or just get it, projected so that we all as Kenyans would say that, oh, well, maybe we actually need some foreigners to come and manage the airport, because then we've not been able to manage it. But as you have seen, the airport workers themselves coming out to demonstrate and to say that this is not what they want.
The staff are here, they have worked overnight. Some of them are crying, they are going to lose their jobs. Of course, you can't assure us that an investor who is not accepted in another country will come with a goodwill.
And one would want to ask, why would they have to demonstrate? Some have argued it's because, well, they are worried that if another person then comes to manage the airport, chances of them losing their jobs are high. And that has historically been proven that sometimes when there's a new management, they sometimes tend to face off, the previous people who used to work at this place, and they come with their own that are new. But equally, they could be just trying to project the voice that needs to be heard by the leadership, that if you empower us some more, maybe we can do even better in terms of taking care of the airport by ourselves. And at this point, you want to ask ourselves, just what is the deal between the presidents? Not the president, I mean, what is the deal between the country and the Adani Group? At what extent has it been negotiated? Is this something we can reverse? If it can't be reversed, then how do we proceed with this arrangement or agreement? Or if it can be reversed, what are the repercussions to it? What are the legal implications to that? And I think sometime, on this show, we probably are going to be engaging individuals that are, perhaps more aware of the legal implications to all this, or perhaps the critical aspects of it, to just get to hear their view on the same. And like we say, this is a conversation that has been on left, right, and center, but we have to get to the ultimate bit of it and understand how do we forge forward as a country. One thing we are used to doing is to, getting emotions all high and up at a time when such a concern has been raised. And then we are talking about it, we're talking about it, before you know it, something else has come up and we have buried that, and the damage continues to be on. Before you know it, the country has gone down. Of course, we have not gotten to that point, but we keep saying that different sectors have gone down, courtesy of us ignoring this. I think the government, or let's just say the leadership, should be happy that the citizenry is actively, probing some of these matters. It helps us a great deal. You heard the Deputy President say the other day that theirs is the business of bringing proposals, bringing ideas to the people, and, trying to see whether these ideas will work for the betterment of the nation. In the event that the people feel like, this is not the way to go, then we all sit down and agree that indeed we should perhaps change tact. We certainly hope that at this point, then we are actively involved, pundits, people who understand what it takes to come up with such, arrangements, then are engaged so that we do not land ourselves in trouble. Remember, I said that I've just been checking to see what are some of the concerns that people then would raise in relation to the Adani. That is based on their records. And, you look at the stock manipulation aspects, the allegations that have come along with that of course they have been faced with allegations of using opaque fund, that is to manipulate stock prices, and I said I'll be referring to some of the notes that I have created. So this report, of course, was out by the Organized Crime and Corruption, that is reporting project, that went ahead to claim that the group invested millions of dollars in its own public or publicly traded stocks, that is through offshore structures. Well, something that the Adani Group has since, disputed and say that, of course, these are just mere allegations and they lack merit. Another thing is the Hindenburg Research Project, or perhaps the report. And of course, this is a US-based short seller accused, where they accused the Adani Group of brazen stock manipulation and accounting fraud. And so I began by pinpointing the Gupta family and the influence that they had in South Africa, one of Africa's greatest nations, perhaps the greatest of all time. And Kenya, follows closely. The likes of Nigeria, Egypt, they follow closely. We would hate to see such nations going down just because of silly mistakes that perhaps the leadership did, and the arrangements that they made with people who might have had good intentions, but then again it just doesn't end well. And so there was some leaked emails some times back of the association of the Adani Group with the Gupta Brothers. And now when you see, or when you get to hear that there are such associations, don't you think you would want to, your heart skips a bit as a Kenyan? Because then you are like, we assume same poor. And if we assume same poor, or that is not a good entity, then you have to be on alert every time that you're dealing with them. Let us agree that, again, there is also a record of the good things that the Adani Group has done under their companies, of course, under their leadership. Let us agree on that. But the question at hand is, what is the deal for the people of Kenya? Just how involved are our leaders? The social contract that I talked about earlier on, where the Adani children are saying that, every time we're negotiating a deal with a certain country, we must always put to mind what is there for India, what is there for us as our company. Has our country asked itself that question? What is there for the people of Kenya? If they're going to lease the managing of the JKIA or the airport for, say, 100 years, what is there for the people of Kenya at the end of the day? Is it going to be a plus? Is it going to be a negative? And let us admit that we have, other foreign investors that are in the country and are managing lots of activities in the country, and in a good way. Let's give credit for that. Let us appreciate that. But is this what we're being treated to? If it is the case, can it be explained to us in layman's language, so that the people who work at the airports are confident that they're not going to lose their jobs, so that the people of Kenya are sure that then we are handing our pride into the right hands? They pride themselves of having handled infrastructure, airport infrastructure, for about 6 years. Is 6 years credible enough for you to bestow an airport that you've had for the longest of time, the pride of Africa, perhaps you would want to call it, to them? Does it merit? Logically speaking, I'm not a businesswoman, I'm not a business guru or an entrepreneur, but even just trying to imagine and to think, perhaps they would not match. Sometimes when you get to the office and you're told you're given 3 months probation period, some people will tell you we give you 3 years based on the magnitude of the assignment that you're going to handle. This is quite a huge assignment. Can they do it? Once again, going back to the South African region, talk of South Africa itself, talk of Zimbabwe, the numerous times where the white settlers were poked. And, the people of Zimbabwe kept on saying that, we want the white settlers to go away. The people of South Africa kept on saying, we want the white settlers to go away. And true to it, some of them went. But when you look at some of these pieces of land that they were trying to recapture, if I may call that, or perhaps to bring back to the African child or to the South African child, you ask yourself, just how much has it benefited them? Some of them are not able to till. They probably do not have the technicality, the technology to till these pieces of land. And when you give it to a foreigner or a foreign investor, they turn that into a heaven, a Garden of Eden. You want to reflect, you want to ask yourselves, even as we're talking about Adani and saying Indians, 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 remember we have the Indian brothers in the country who are equally Kenyans. They were declared the 44th tribe, if I may remember well, during the President Uhuru Mugai presidency. And you must sit down to ask yourself, are we poking them so hard that they feel the pinch? And let us agree that they're Kenyans. Of course, this is Indian Kenyans, and the Adani are Indian Indians. But reality is that, there's always a connection. We keep saying that we are an ethnocentric, country. Remember during the times where we had the conversation of the border, the maritime border concerns between Kenya, and Somalia, we still have it, as a boiling pot. and not in the good way, or boiling pot in a negative way. And it acts the Somali people, the same way it would act them, the Kenyan Somalis, the same way it would act the Somalians, So let us be sensitive in having these conversations, but let us call upon the government to know that we are alert as a people, we are aware, we are reading, we understand the kind of nation that we want. We want to live a nation that is good for our children and their children. Mr. President, the leadership, I think in layman's language, that is what the Kenyan people are saying. Could you please just explain some of these arrangements that you make to us better as dictated by the Constitution? Could you please involve us? Public participation. Perhaps we would not be going round and round and round with these conversations like we are with the Adani Group conversation. I look forward to hear from you, of course, your comments down there. And as we always say, it is not cast in stone. It is just us having a conversation, weighing into the matter, and then we pick what works best for us for a better Kenya. My name is Linda Alela.